Assalamu alaikum, everybody. We start now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, everybody. We're going to start a Quran study session, God willing. We're going to read from the AEVQ, the Authorized English Version of Quran by Rashad Khalifa. It has footnotes and subtitles that you won't find in other Qurans. You can go online to like submission.ws and you can read, I believe he's got it, that you can actually read it from the website, maybe. Hold on a second, I just got interrupted. Okay, I'm back. Or if you have a hard copy of the Quran, the actual book, you can read along with us. This is what we do. Each one of us reads along with whoever. Each day there is a person who's reciting, and so we all read along with them, and only one person recites and reads aloud, and then one person will discuss the verses. We'll talk about the verses, and then after the reciter is finished reading, then we do an open discussion. And we got some people that are on the app that will talk. But people who are on YouTube who are not on the app can post comments or ask questions, and we'll try to, God willing, make sure to pay attention and either answer or bring up your comment or question. So today we're going to continue from the last, I'm the reader today, by the way, the last person who they read from chapter 15, Surah 15, and they finished at verse 50. So today we're going to start at, God willing, at verse 51. Talking about Abraham. Chapter 15. What is chapter 15? The Valley Hijr. And 51, starting with the angels are going to come to visit Abraham. And what else? Did I mention that we're using the AEV? Yes, I did. Okay, so, and before we read the Quran, we should seek refuge, have to ask God to protect us from Satan and the whispers of the devils, try to drive us astray and try to ruin as we're trying to learn this, to try to distort it and corrupt it and make us go astray. So we ask God to protect us so that we learn this correctly. These words in this Quran are actually the word of God, just like previous scriptures. But one difference being that the Quran has been had a code in it. It's been divinely protected by God with a mathematical code encrypted in it, and it's been preserved. So we know that this is the proven word of God, with no alterations have been made. And this is the most recent update from God, as he has sent messengers over throughout time consecutively, and they have all came with updates and revisions and clarifications. So this is the most recent, and this book is actually the final book that God's going to send, and there will be no more books after this. And so shall we go on? So I seek refuge in God from Satan, rejecting my Lord. I seek refuge in you from the whisper of the devil. Let's come near me. Okay. Verse 51. Inform them about Abraham's guests. When they entered his quarters, they said, "Peace." He said, "We are apprehensive about you." So that's Abraham. When it says he said, Abraham said, "We are apprehensive about you." They said, "Do not be apprehensive. We have good news for you." And enlightened son. He said, "How can you give me such good news when I am so old? Do you still give me this good news?" So what he's doing is he's asking, like, I'm too old to have children, and his wife too. I'm not sure if it's going to come up in these verses or in another verse. He says, my wife is so old. I think he might even say she's sterile. I'm not sure where the verse is. So he's like, how can we be having children? How could he be telling this? And another thing is, in other verses in the Quran, I'm going to say story, but it's not a story. It's a true history. This really happened, rather than just being a story. As a lot of rejectors and disbelievers say, tales from the past, stories from the past. So this is not stories. This is a history. So I'm going to say that in the history and other verses in the Quran, Abraham actually had them made a roasted calf brought to them, and they wouldn't touch it. So why he was apprehensive, I do not know. But the fact that he would let strangers into his home and cook for them and then be apprehensive, who knows? But they said, don't worry about it. Another thing is, I'd like to point out here that the angel said peace. Some people will read the Quran and they'll find a verse that says, certain people, you should just say, ignorant people or disbelievers or something like that, you say peace and disregard. And another verse says, when you meet believers, you should say, peace be upon you. So people have come up with a distortion that, peace be upon you is only to say to believers, and peace, when you want to say somebody's ignorant, you say peace. You don't say be upon you. But here's the angels came to Abraham and they said peace, and they didn't say be upon you. So that interpretation that people came up is proven wrong. Peace be upon you. Peace without be upon you doesn't mean that person is a evil person. Anyways, I just thought I'd bring that up. But some people, if they do say that, they might be thinking that because they come up with that twisted interpretation. But don't be suspicious that everybody who greets you with just peace without be upon you is thinking that. You shouldn't have assume what somebody's thinking in a negative way without being certain. Or you shouldn't be suspicious at all. So I kind of went off context, but it just happened to be there. And the reason I brought this up is because this is the verse which, when they came up with this theory, this interpretation, this is one of the verses that I found which prove like, no, you're wrong. Look at this. The angels are saying peace. So let me go on. So where do we leave off on 54? Abraham's asking, how can you say this to us? To me, I'm old. My wife is old and sterile. They said the good news. So now I'm going to continue reading 55. They said, the good news we give you is true. Don't despair. Do not despair. He said, none despairs of his Lord's mercy except the strayers. So despair means to give up hope. It's like, just don't believe the possibility. Just to like give up, to totally despair, become despondent. It's like, I'm not even gonna try anymore. I just don't believe there's any possibility. So we shouldn't despair of what God can do, of God's mercy, right? And Abraham says, nobody does that. Nobody gives up hope on God except people who have gone astray. So, I mean, obviously, right? If you've given up hope, then you've gone astray. And if you've gone astray, then you're giving up hope, No, if you've gone astray. Yeah. Strayers. So a strayer would be somebody who was possibly on a path and then went off of it. They strayed from it. I don't know. Anyways, let me continue reading. 57. Abraham is going to talk. Abraham, he said, what is your mission, O messengers? They said, we are dispatched to guilty people. As for Lot's family, we will save them all, but not his wife. She is destined to be with the doomed. So at this point, Abraham appear in 57 appears. Apparently, Abraham already knows who they are, so he shouldn't be apprehensive anymore. For some reason, he knows who they are. Probably, oh, well, they told him. In these verses we just read, it says, we bring you good news. But I think in another verses, they give more information about themselves in some other chapters in the Quran. So he's now calling them messengers. He knows what they are. He knows who they are. And then they tell him, so they, I guess it seems like they stopped by Abraham's house on the way to Lot's. And they told him they're going to Sodom and Gomorrah, the famous history that everybody knows of. They think it's just a story, but it's not. It's an actual history. It's a fact. And so we have it in the Quran. So Quran confirms previous scriptures. So if you don't see it in here, it's not confirmed. So the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot and Abraham and the angels has been confirmed. And the story about Lot's wife not making it is confirmed with the Quran. The one thing that's not confirmed is the pillar of salt, of her turning into a pillar of salt. That's not in here, but she was doomed. But I'm not sure. I might be wrong. Is it in here? I don't remember seeing it in the Quran anywhere. Huh? No. My wife says no. Secretary. My secretary. Or is it the other way around? Okay, so let me go on. Let me go back to reading. Verse 61. Now we're going to talk about Lot. So now they're arriving to Lot. The messengers went to Lot's town. He said, you are unknown people. They said, we bring to you what they have been doubting. We bring you the truth. We are truthful. You shall take your family during the night. Stay behind them and make sure that none of you looks back. Go straight as commanded. So this is pretty much what's in the Bible, right? The previous, that he had to stop them from even turning around and turning back. Is it literally turning around? Was this a disobedience by just turning around, or was this some kind of something of the heart being divided and not willing to let go? People have come up with many different reasons about this. They're not content to just leave. They're holding on to, who knows? But they weren't even supposed to look back. Still no pillar of salt in here, but anyways. We bring to you what they have been doubting. So Lot was preaching to them, to the people of this Sodom and Gomorrah, and they didn't believe. They doubted. They rejected. And I'm pretty sure that they challenged. I'm not sure if I believe in the other verse, they must have challenged him. Go ahead, bring the retribution. Let's see what God can do. Like a lot of history in the Quran, messengers have been challenged to bring retribution, bring punishment from God because we're rejecting you. Let's see. And so maybe this is what they're saying. They were bringing that because they didn't think it's gonna happen. So Lot was also like, who are these people, right? You are unknown people. So now we'll continue reading, God willing. 66. We delivered to him this command. Those people are to be annihilated in the morning. The people of the city came joyfully. He said, these are my guests. Do not embarrass me. Fear God and do not shame me. They said, did we not enjoin you from contacting anyone? Okay, so this part of trying to put out God's light, trying to silence God by telling the messenger not to preach, to keep quiet. And today we have a lot of people doing this with no threat. Nobody comes up to them and threatens to kill them and rape them. But they keep silence because they're scared to even get in, arguments. So you'll get churches who won't want to talk about homosexuality or Sodom and Gomorrah, right? I have a question. Has the guy who likes to fill stadiums and with hundreds of thousands of people, do they like to what do they do when they get to the verses about this? What's his name? Joel Osteen. I would like to know if he ever talked about homosexuality and drugs and alcohol and adultery, and does he avoid these things? Is he scared what's gonna, he doesn't want to lose his masses. It's easy to fill seats with people who can violate all the rules and say everything's gonna be hunky-dory. They love a religion like that. I could do everything that God says don't do, and I have this preacher telling me it's gonna be okay. Oh man, everybody's gonna show up to that. You could sell that easily. You can do everything. So anyways, what we have here is just like mafia. If you talk, you're going to get killed. So they came up to him and they told him, didn't we tell you not to talk to anybody? And that is confirmed in the previous scripture too. This situation. And actually in the previous scripture, it says what was it? They accuse him of stirring up, making trouble or something like that, or trying to be righteous. So there's people actually in my congregation who use the same philosophy. If I talk about something that's not supposed to be done, they'll condemn me. And they literally a couple of months ago told me to shut up and don't talk about it. And don't preach it in the sermon or they're not going to show up. Just like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And boy, they were very aggressive and nasty to me too. My brothers and sisters. Let me continue, God willing. 71. He said, "Here are my daughters if you must." But alas, they were totally blinded by their lust. So they're threatening to molest, rape the male guests. And he says, this part has bothered me when he offers his daughters to them. When I first started to be a submitter to, submission, Islam, the religion, I had a problem with this messenger offering his daughters. At this moment, my mind doesn't give me the good explanation, but I know somebody else on here during the open discussion is going to explain this better. But it is not what it appears to be. I doubt that he was really doing that. And in fact, he probably knew they're not going to take his daughters, right? He knows what they're up to. So he offers something to somebody that he knows they're not going to take it. It's like, if they don't want the money and you say, here's $1 million and pull it out of your pocket and they're going to take it. You don't want to give it to them, but they're not going to take it and they're not going to take it. So you offer it to them. If they don't like lobster and you offer them your lobster, whatever. Anyway, so they were after homosexuality, and not only homosexuality, but it's homosexuality as a kind of like a humiliation and as an evil act. Interesting. That's interesting. You're gonna commit a homosexual sex act on somebody as a punishment? That's weird. Little weirdos. Okay, so anyways, let me continue reading. But alas, they were totally blinded by their lust. Oh, I want to say something else. The topic that I was talking about, that I was told to keep quiet, was not this. But the people in my community, they would have no problem talking bad about homosexuality. Oh, they'll all get into that. But the sins that they commit, oh, we can't talk about that. Quite interesting. I've always found that to be, I guess you're going to find that among religious people all the time, right? My guess. So he offered his daughters. They were not interested. They were interested in the two male guests. And so I'll continue reading. Consequently, the disaster struck them in the morning. We turned it upside down and showered them with devastating rocks. This is a lesson for those who possess intelligence. This will always be the system. When I first started in submission, somebody described picking up a city and turning it upside down with his hand. And I was like, oh. And then I never really realized it actually says we turned it upside down. So he did a gesture. He just like scooping up sand and then just scooping up sand like this and then just go like that. And I was like, well, hey, it kind of does say that. And maybe that's why they can't find it. They just literally got, I don't know, just that is not really important. It's just a fun thing to think about. It's not, I'm not saying I'm right. It's a fact. It's just interesting. I got a kick out of it when I figured out what he was saying. This is a lesson for those, I'm going to continue reading. 75. This is a lesson for those who possess intelligence. This will always be the system. This is a sign for the believers. So, possess intelligence is to those who possess intelligence. I'm tired of using a lot of referencing verses without reading the actual verse. Hold on a second while I. Well, what I'm trying to find is a verse that says the real intelligence is being a submitter, being appreciative, being a believer, and obeying God and trusting in God and having reverence for God and remembering God and taking heed of God's revelations, and because you have reverence for God's word, and being a believer or somebody a submitter who eventually will be raised and blessed to be raised to the position of a real believer who has had all doubts removed. So that's a real intelligence, is making the right choice. This is a lesson for those who possess intelligence. So Sodom and Gomorrah is a lesson. Somebody who possesses intelligence will learn from a lesson. And if somebody who doesn't possess intelligence will not learn from the lesson. There's a lot of people in this world who have not learned from the lesson of Sodom and Gomorrah. So they're not intelligent. Interesting. And this will always be the system. What is this? What happened in Sodom and Gomorrah will always be the system, or only the people who possess intelligence will learn from the lesson, take heed. That's 76. This will always be the system. This is a sign for the believers. A couple of questions I have, but God willing, somebody will talk about it. So I'm going to continue. 78. The people of the woods also were transgressors. Consequently, we avenge them. And both communities are fully documented. The people of Al-Hijj disbelieved the messengers. We gave them our revelations, but they disregarded them. They used to carve secure homes out of the mountains. The disaster hit them in the morning. What they hoarded did not help them. So we went through a list of a couple or a few more people that had the same thing. God sends his messengers, they rejected, and it was done for them. It was over. Man, we were really lucky today. We're really lucky that God gives us a lot more time than he gave some of these people, I think. Because the world would be over right now. How many people would be dust today? Oh, end of the world unveiled. So I'm going to continue reading because I don't have much to say about these. Talked about Al-Hijj and people carve homes into the mountains. So these are different types of geographical locations and tribes or whatever, communities that existed that are gone. And throughout the Quran, you're going to find a lot of them that rejected the messengers, rejected God. It's really not about the messengers, but about rejecting God. Let's, so I'm going to continue reading God. Verse 85. There's a subtitle above it. It says it's the end of the world, unveiled, 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 unveiled. So it's always been in the Quran, but it's been blocked, divinely veiled. So it's not like it's something new. It's been in the book for a long time, but nobody was able to see it. And God removed the veil. And this came with the after the God also unveiled the mathematical miracle, the code, the encryption that he had in the Quran, that he has in the Quran. He unveiled that, and with that came this information, all the mathematical stuff for the calculations of the end of the world, and it's all interconnected to the initials that start many of the chapters have these initials that nobody could figure them out since the Quran was released. But God made it so that they would continue to publish Qurans with these initials. Even though they didn't know what it was, they didn't never decide to delete them. But God was divinely controlling everything. And the fact that it was found, this mathematical miracle, and the calculations for the end of the world, God says that not anybody can just find these things, because think about it, it was divinely guarded. So God is the one who guarded it. That means you cannot find it unless God allows you to find it. And only one person found it. And he's the person that wrote this AEVQ. He didn't find it. God unveiled it. God predestined him to be the one to unveil it through him. To me, this is one of his proofs that this guy was chosen by God. He's a messenger of God. He was. He's not alive anymore. Well, he's not alive with us on earth anymore. He's in paradise now. So anyways, let me go on. It was unveiled. And let me read. We did not create the heavens and the earth and everything between them except for a specific purpose. The end of the world will come, so treat them with benign neglect. Benign neglect. Benign? What is that? Benign? Malignant? Is that right there? The opposite of benign? Benign, gentle and kindly. What's the antonym? I think it's malignant. It's interesting. Benign neglect. That God is actually telling you to be nice, but neglect the disbelievers. I think he's talking about rejectors and disbelievers and hypocrites. This reminds me of the verse that God says, just say peace and disregard. Benign neglect, peace and disregard. Looks the same to me. There's Rashad put a footnote under this verse. And he's saying that verses 85 through 88, and he's giving this footnote. One of the functions of God's messenger of the covenant is to deliver the Quranic assertion that the world will end in AD 2280. And he referenced the verses of the Quran, chapter 20, verse 15, chapter 72, verse 17. And then he wrote an appendix to walk you through it, how you would be able to see how it's been there, and God unveiled it through him, to us. Let's try real quick. Hopefully we won't get to be a really long subject. Try. So let me go to one of the verses that he references. Chapter 20, verse 15. And he put a subtitle, End of the World is not hidden. The hour, I'm going to read the verse. Chapter 20, verse 15. The hour, end of the world, is surely coming. I will keep it almost hidden, for each soul must be paid for its works. I will keep it almost hidden, for each soul must be paid for its works. Almost hidden. So it's been hidden until he unveiled it. That's funny. And then it's still hidden for people who reject the idea of the math miracle and the messenger of God, and this person being the messenger of the covenant. And so they can still be blocked out, even though it's still been unveiled. But for them, since they're rejectors, so some people, even though it's right here for all the world to know, when it happens on the year 2280, some people are still going to be shocked. Well, if you were a disbeliever, you wouldn't be shocked because you would believe and you would have known. So it's still almost hidden, and each soul must be paid. Oh my God. So this is not like you got to go through and you got to do your homework. It's almost hidden. You got to do your research, use your ears, your eyes, and your brain. And you got to have you can't have a blind heart. You got to have a heart that sees. And then you see it, what's almost hidden. Do not be diverted therefrom by those who do not believe in it, those who pursue their own opinions, lest you fail. I'm going to read another verse real quick. What other verse does he mention? Oh, it's in there, 72. Huh. He references chapter 72, verse 27 as part of the verses used for the. And I'm going to go to that right now. Oh, that's the verse I was just going to look at, and it's the verse he referenced. Never mind. Let me go to it. It's further say what I was saying. Hold on, I'm going. Chapter 72, verse 27. Only to a messenger that he chooses does he reveal from the past and the future specific news. Hold on a second. So there's a footnote he put on here. The messenger here is named mathematically as Rashad Khalifa, to whom God revealed the end of the world. See Appendix 25. The number of verses from the first verse in the first chapter 1, verse 1, to this verse in this chapter 27, verse 72, where the messenger message is mentioned. So it's 5,472 verses from the first verse of the Quran, which is a multiple of 19 times 72 times 4. The word Rashada occurs 4 times in chapter 72. The value of Rosh Hashanah is 504, plus the verse number 28. 28 verses in chapter 72 is 532.19. So it's more mathematical proofs, more mathematical signs, proofs. And it's going on to talk about more. The value of Rashad Khalifa is 230. What it says value, and this is kind of difficult for me to explain that the Arabic and numbers and how the letters or the word have numbers, and it's very difficult for me to talk about something that I can't really talk about this. This is really complicated stuff. Not unless you know Arabic. I just don't know how to say it. Like letters have grammatical values. Something about either they didn't have numbers or they didn't have letters or they used letters for numbers in the past or something like that. See, very vague what I'm saying. Anyways, let me go on. So Rashad Khalifa's name is also I think it's also, is it also a divisible by 19? Anyways, but when you add the geometrical value of his name plus this chapter 72 plus 20, oh my God. So you got to read this. Let me go on. Add up to the crucial expression only to a messenger that he chooses has a value 1919. So this information, you would think, well, anybody could have read the Quran and there it is. But Rashad says, no, the Quran says, God says in the Quran that he only reveals these things to a messenger that he chooses. So this is another proof from God that he's a messenger, because he gave him this information. He says he only gives this information to messengers that he chooses. Plus he has many other proofs. This is, where is, they ask you about the end of the world. Anyways, this subject of the end of the world, let me go one more thing here. Appendix 25, real quick. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I wonder if this is the appendix that actually walks you through all the different verses and the calculations. It even talks about this chapter 18, the cave, and the cave has the mentions the sleepers of Ephesus. Even mentions the birth of Jesus as being a marker for using during the calculations. And the sleepers of Ephesus is also used for the marker of the calculations, and all the verses of the Quran were giving him the words like this, that these are the markers to use. And there's an appendix where he literally walks you through all the calculations and all the verses used. I wonder if it's appendix 25 that he referenced. I think it is. Yeah, you got to read appendix 25. So this is written by Rashad. It's at the end of after the actual Quran verses. But what this is all full of reference to Quran. So he's explaining a lot of details with full justification he's justifying everything with the Quran. So you can't say that this is not Quran, because he's actually teaching you what was in the Quran but was veiled. And you would have never found it, you would have never seen it. This is the person who was chosen to be revealed to him, through him to us. So he's walking you through the whole thing. And don't imagine that you would have done it yourself. Otherwise, you don't believe that God divinely guarded things. you know, the omnipotence of God. I'm trying to, how do I say that? I'm trying to say there. I don't know if I would read 25, but it's really long. It's kind of, it's really fun. You really got to open verses and every reference, every justification, every verse reference, you got to go through it and look at it, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And it doesn't, it's not nonsense. It's really like, wow, it's real. It's real. It's wow. It's if you've seen what's that guy? He made the movie Da Vinci Code. The Da Vinci Code. You all know the movie Da Vinci Code, and then that actor came out with a few movies with the similar cracking codes and Da Vinci Code and religion and faith and all this stuff. It's like, that's nothing. This is the real Da Vinci Code here. This is better than the Da Vinci Code. This is the real deal. Real encryption. Never will anybody be able to do this. It needed the computer to be able to decipher this. The computer was needed. So not only that, but God planned the evolution of mankind so that the computer that we needed would happen at this time. Everything God planned it out. I mean, he could have had us evolve a little faster, but he could have gave us more information, but no. He planned everything step by step. The splitting of the moon is another one of the points for used in the calculations, I think, right? If I'm not mistaken. What I'm saying right as I'm asking my fellow readers who are on with me. Let's see. So where did I leave off? I'm thoroughly... And I didn't even read the verse, did I? Yes, I did. So let me go on. I had only read verse 85, but I'm going to read 86 and start reading some more from chapter 15. Your Lord is the creator, the omniscient. We have given you the 7 pairs. Oh, these are the things that I was talking about. We have given you the 7 pairs and the great Quran. So the 7 pairs are the initials, the initials that have been mysterious. And you'll see a lot of people today talking about how they know what they are now, but they'll never acknowledge that who God chose to reveal it. Who was the one that God chose to unveil it? As if anybody would have ever figured out what the 7 pairs were. No, they wouldn't have, never. And there's only one reason they know, is because God unveiled it through one person. But they'll try to go around that and say, but he's not a messenger. He wasn't, whatever, too bad for you. And when they do that, they suffer a consequence. And even though they know about the 7 pairs and they know about all these things, they get things wrong. They take things out of context and they make a lot of errors. If God sent somebody for you to listen to them, you got to listen to them if you believe in God. Because God said, listen to this person. This person speaks for me. And if you want to listen to God, you listen to this person that God said, listen to him. He's speaking for me. If you don't listen to them, it's because you're not listening to God. Because this person is a guy that God sent. And if you don't believe that God sent the person, then you don't believe God because God sent the person. Anyway, very... So the 7 pairs, there it is. That's it. That's all the initials. If you go to chapter 2, you read chapter 1, and then you go to chapter 2. So you read chapter 1, which is 1 page, 7 small, tiny verses. It's called the key. You open the Quran, and the first page is a key. You open the Quran, and there's a key. And the key is what we're used to pray all the time. Not all the time, but it's used for a specific type of prayer. Everybody can pray all the time. Everybody can pray to God, help me, or thank you, or please forgive me, or whatever. They could pray all day long. But this prayer that you see people doing, where they're doing this thing on a rug and they're doing this routine, they're saying this chapter 1. But anyways, if you go to chapter 1, it's very short. You flip the first page and you go to the next page, and right at the beginning, it has some initials. And this is part of the encryption, the seven pairs. I scrolled forward and now I'm lost. I've given you the 7 pairs. Okay, let me go on. 88. Do not be jealous of what we bestowed upon the other messengers, and do not be saddened by the disbelievers, and lower your wing for the believers, and proclaim, I am the manifest warner. We will deal with the dividers. They accept the Quran only partially. By your Lord, we will question them all about everything they have done. Therefore, carry out the orders given to you and disregard the idol worshippers. We will spare you the mockers. So there's people who we will deal with the dividers. They accept the Quran only partially. Dividers, they accept the Quran only partially. So this would be one of the qualifications of a divider, is a person who accepts the Quran only partially. One of the key points of description for them. I don't know how you say that. So they will say, we believe in Quran, we're Muslims, but we don't believe in the messenger of the covenant. But if you go to chapter 3, verse 81, God says, I'm going to send a messenger after all the scriptures, and he's going to confirm, and later in the other verses. And it says, if you don't believe in this messenger, if you don't believe in this prophecy in the Quran, then you're out of the religion because you no longer believe in the Quran. So for me, I used to be a little bit shocked, kind of like, how can this person be saying, if you believe in God, but you don't believe in me, then you're going to hell. And I thought that's kind of weird until I read the footnote until I read the chapter which talks about the prophecy. And then I found a footnote, 381, major prophecy fulfilled, God's messenger of the covenant. Chapter 3, verse 81, God took a covenant from the prophet saying, I will give you the scripture and wisdom. Afterwards, a messenger will come to confirm all existing scriptures. You shall believe in him and support him. He said, do you agree with this and pledge to fulfill this covenant? They said, we agree. He said, you have thus borne witness, I bear witness along with you. So this is in the Quran, right? I just read something in the Quran. Now, if you say you're a believer and you believe in the Quran, then you have to believe what's in the Quran. And you say you believe in God, then God put this in the Quran, you got to believe this. And then you choose to reject when this actual person comes, then you no longer believe in the Quran. It's just you have disbelieved after having believed. You might have believed at one point, but now you're faced with a choice and you made the wrong decision. So you're a disbelief after belief. Now, if we go on, this is what's made me to realize that he's not really saying that you disbelieve in me, therefore you're no longer a submitter. Where is it? Hold on a second, bear with me. Oh man, is it chapter 3, verse 63? Can somebody give me a hand here? Okay, hold on, guys. My mind is racing in so many directions. I gotta slow it down.
Uh, 382.
Thanks, man. Somebody. Help! 382. No, it's a footnote. It says people who don't believe this are no longer submitters because they don't believe in Quran. .386. Man, it's right in front of my eyes. It's a few verses after the prophecy is mentioned. Then you go to 386. Why should God guide people who disbelieved after believing, and after witnessing that the messenger is the truth, and after solid proofs have been given to them? So 381 talks about the prophecy. Now 386 talks about people who disbelieved after believing. So you say you're a Muslim and you believed in Quran, but now here's this person saying that he's the messenger of the covenant, and you no longer believe in the verses which talk about, you reject the verses which talk about the messenger of the covenant. So you disbelieve after having believed. And after witnessing that the messenger is the truth, after solid proof, which is the mathematical miracle which was unveiled through him and God gave him as one of his proofs of messengership. And so there's your solid proofs that you still don't believe. And it's been given to him. God does not guide the wicked. Why should God guide people? So no longer will they be guided. So you read the footnote. Verses 382 through 90 inform us that those who reject God's messenger of the covenant are no longer submitters, Muslims, since they no longer believe the Quran. The proofs mentioned in 386 revert to the Quran's mathematical code, which was revealed through God's messenger of the covenant. So it's everything I'm saying. Wow. Both 386 and talk about disbelieving after believing. So I'm sure a lot of students of Quran will know there's other verses which talked about believing and then disbelieving and then believing and then disbelieving and then going deeper into disbelief and becoming content with that, right? So you can play games back and forth. Once you choose, like, okay, I disbelieve, and then you're like, you know what, I disbelieve, I'm content with that. Oh, you're really in trouble, man. But just wavering back and forth is already enough trouble. You makes it really hard. So what was my point? Let me go back where I was reading. Was that 88? Do not be jealous of these and lower ones. Anyways. So my point for this was that I used to always think like this person is saying, and I kind of was a difficulty for me. The person saying, well, if you don't believe in me, and I'm like, wait a minute, somebody believes in God, and you're saying that because they don't believe in you, they're gonna go to hell. That's like idol worship, I thought. No, they believe in God, that should be enough, right? No. Because the point is, God gave the Quran, and God said this in the Quran, and you don't believe God because this is the proven word of God. This is like God sitting there talking to you. This is the proven word of God. Like, and you're not odd. You're like, oh yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't agree with that. So you don't believe. It's just lip service to you. You failed. You have been exposed. But it's a good thing you're still alive, right? You can change. Guess what? You've been exposed. You can say thank God for showing me the hypocrisy in me, and like maybe repent and reform while you're still alive, and try to get it right, work on it again. But as long as you're still alive, you always got a chance to repent for anything. So I'll continue to the end, God willing. A few more verses. I'm going to go back to what I was reading. Do not be jealous of what we bestowed upon the other messengers. Do not be saddened by the disbelievers. Lower your wings for the believers. Lower your wings for the believers. I don't know what that is. Seems to be talking to the messenger. Lower your wing. So I don't know. Lower your wing. Lower your wing. So he got this stuff. So God unveiled it to the messenger. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm just reading this and trying to think, what does it mean? God revealed this to the messenger, and the messenger is like, woohoo! I'm guided. This is great. And I'm just going to take off. Forget about all these losers. Maybe he's saying like, no. Calm, they go back down there and teach them too. Don't just take off and leave everybody in the dust. I don't know. Don't just fly away with it for yourself. What's that? Yeah, you like lower your wings, and it's maybe it's saying be humble, be nice to them, even though they're away. No, but it says lower your wing for the believer, not the disbelievers and the hypocrites and the evil people, the idol worshippers. Do not be saddened and lower your wing. I don't know. He can't be protecting them with his wings, as I've heard people say. God's a protector. I like the idea that I just had. Don't just go back. Don't just take off and go back there and share it. Put your wings down. I don't know. Proclaim, I am the manifest warner. Manifest. Obvious, right? Isn't that the definition? Like so obvious, evident? Let's see.
Yeah,
Clear.
let's. Okay, sorry.
Manifest is clear or obvious. So he is a manifest warner, meaning that his proof is very clear and is very obviously this guy is a messenger of God. What were you gonna say, Nudrat? Nudrat? Who was that? Salãmun Alaykum? Hello? Okay, I got like 8 more verses. We will deal with the dividers. They accept the Quran. Oh, wait, I already read that. By your Lord, we will question them all about everything they have done. Ooh, we got a bunch of these today. They accept the Quran only partially and they're dividers. Carry out the command, the orders given to you. That's probably talking to the messenger, but I'm sure we all have to do this. And this is all the Quran. We have to accept the whole Quran, the entire Quran, not just part of it. And we're going to follow it and we got to apply it to our lives. We will spare you the mockers. That's a good one. What does that mean? I had something to say, but I don't remember it. The mockers set up another god beside God. They will surely find out. Ooh. So those who mocking the messenger of the covenant and the revelation of the math miracle and all his proofs and everything that came with it, they're idol worshippers. It's comparing them. They're saying that they set up another god beside God because they're following other words. We know full well that you may be annoyed by their utterances. You shall sing the praise of your Lord and be with the prostrators and worship your Lord in order to attain certainty. The practices of worship are our means of attaining certainty. That was the last verse.
Masha Allah, thank you.
Also, now we're going to do the open discussion, God willing, where everybody can anything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Edward.
Who's that?
Me? Me who?
Oh, that was you, Nudrat?
Yeah,
Your voice
that was
sounded
me.
different.
You know, I wanted to comment on the verses we read around like verse 54 and 55, that really talks about God's omnipotence. So like in Abraham's case, this was God's covenant with Abraham, that he will continue to send messengers from his progeny, right? And that's really being fulfilled here when God is giving him good news of a child at such an old age. Um, and I mean, the fact that he is so old and his wife is sterile, and God was able to uh, God allowed them to have a child at such an old age. I think this good news that God gave to him, should be good news for everybody, because uh, as it says in verse 56, he said, "None despairs of his Lord's mercy except the strayers." So Imagine like not wanting to have something, some wish that you want to to come true, and you try for years and it never happens. And we can, as human beings, we can easily lose hope that at some point we will give up. uh, but believers, God says that they never despair. And I think that's a great lesson that God teaches us in the Quran too, because a lot of times people want something and they try, and then they get they despair and they give up. And people who are normally like good at anything are the ones like who don't give up anyways, right? But for a submitter, that means a lot of strength, because we know that God is doing everything and he's omnipotent and anything is possible with God. And if there's something that we want, we should continue to implore God and be hopeful and never despair. That's
Yeah, mashallah. I have a point too around these verses. Praise God. You know, oh, can I speak?
You
Hello?
can speak. You're speaking.
Yeah, I realized I didn't get anybody's permission. I'm like, okay, I should raise my hands first. Anyway, mashallah, yeah, it's just now we know few miraculous births mentioned in Quran. We know a very obvious one is the Mary and birth of Jesus, and then we know John's. John was granted a. It was John, right? Who was granted a child, or Zechariah?
Zechariah was given John.
Okay, at an old age, right? And then Adam, of course, he had no father or mother, and now this is a miraculous birth of Isaac. That completely, his wife was sterile, and so was Abraham old. They had no hope that they will have any child at this age. So this for God, all it takes is to say be, and it is. Subhanallah. And all the descendants and of Abraham were the ones, from his progeny. All the messengers came. Mashallah. It was a predestined matter. I also wanted to highlight something here, that these messengers, meaning these angels, come to Abraham and they give the news, and there's a big contradiction. In Genesis 17, we find, which has been used for as a very um, legitimate reference for circumcision, that according to Genesis 17, God appears, comes in front of Abraham, and Abraham is kind of starting to laugh when God tells him that he's going to have a child. And that's completely not proven by the Quran. And what we see here is, on the contrary, these were two angels disguised as humans come and give the news to Abraham. So now you can see like how much truth is in that chapter. Anyway,
Right. Also, I wanted to comment on the verses about Lot, and homosexuality. And I think the people of Lot, they were just, God says in the Quran, they were just accustomed to their sinful behavior. So they weren't really, I don't see any references in the Quran where it suggests that they were doing it as a punishment, but they were just doing it as a lustful act, as a sin, any other sin that people do. They were accustomed to this kind of behavior, so they wanted to, have sex with the angels, who they thought were males. And so there was really no sort of punishment or threat involved, but they just wanted to get their lustful wishes, basically. And that's why they were, advancing and embarrassing a lot in front of his guests. And I think the other comment about I have is about the a Lot offering his daughters. I think that's just to me, that just is something that would confirm, you know, their sinful behavior. Like, he's not literally really offering his daughters. I mean, even though he's saying it, but it's just, to show their sinful behavior. That they're completely blinded, like they don't care. Like, it's like it kind of also nullifies the claim that they're just doing this because maybe they're desperate or something. Like, it's one thing. Well, it doesn't make it any better, but like, it's not like, it's one thing that's they would go for. Like, in prisons, people don't have access to females, so you see a lot of homosexual behavior, right? But here we're seeing that no, they it's not that, like, they have women. And in fact, we see the lot is even saying, like, here are my daughters if you must. But they're just definitely, literally, like, hell bent on doing this abomination. So I think that's sort of what it proves to me.
Yeah, and also it's not like he's throwing them at them. According to older system, it's like if you read story of Moses, his father, their father approached Moses
Hmm.
for their daughter's hand, pick one. So it was like a custom, like to give in marriage or something the hand of, somebody say, okay, I can give you the hand of my daughter,
Hmm.
if you must. Like, if maybe they were singles or whatnot, obviously. I don't think there was a homosexual marriage allowed at that time. So there must be just these guys. And I'm like, you know, if you need a partner, then I can offer you my daughter, legally or lawfully.
Right. Another important thing I wanted to mention is, we're talking about Abraham, and we mentioned circumcision and Abraham's covenant, and and Genesis 17. And so, we see that people who are taking everything in the Bible literally, that is not corrected, quote unquote, corrected by the messenger, are obviously disobeying the messenger, because the messenger clearly said that you can only accept what is confirmed in the Quran. And unfortunately, that principle has been disregarded by these people. So then, when you look at Lot, for example, when you look at Lot's account in the Bible, is very different from his story in the Quran. I mean, God gives us all the right details, and based on the Quran, we see, like, Lot was a very moral person, as we can see from this example. I mean, he's preaching, he's a prophet, he's a messenger, and he's preaching to them, to uphold God's law and reverence God. And we see in the Bible, on the other hand, that it talks about Lot having four women, and two of his daughters. And well, when Lot, basically has these two daughters that they get him drunk, and he has sex with them, his own daughters, for two consecutive nights. So they're basically saying that if Lot, being a prophet of God, is actually committing incest. And this is given in the Bible. So if they want to take the entire Bible like that, then they must accept this part too, because based on every piece of logic, the messenger didn't point out that, or the Quran didn't say that Lot didn't have sex with his daughters, right? It's because according to their principle, then Quran must say that, but it doesn't. So we cannot just pick and choose. We have to use one consistent source, which is the Quran, and we have to use the one consistent logic, which is that we only accept from the Bible what is confirmed in the Quran, And the Quran confirms the covenant that Abraham had with God, which was that he will make them leaders, give messengers from his progeny, and this is a covenant that will be between Abraham and his people, the righteous among his generation, which has been proven to be true, and mentioned several times in the Quran through the fact that God talks about all those messengers that came from his progeny, and including Muhammad and everyone else. But yeah, this everything that we read in the Bible has to be confirmed by the Quran in order for us to accept it. Anything that we read anywhere, any religious material about any religious account that we don't find in the Quran, we cannot accept it. It may or may not be right, but we don't accept it. We don't believe it for the sake of our own salvation. And if we do, we commit idol worship, basically, which is an unforgivable offense. That's it.
MashaAllah, Salma, good point. Thanks for saying that.
Okay.
Um, I think Edward touched a point about um, verse 76, and was he mentioned that if somebody else wanna discuss that later. So I'm gonna read a few verses here. Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Um, so verse 72, but alas, they were totally blinded by their lust. Consequently, the disaster struck them in the morning. We turned it upside down and showered them with devastating rocks. This is a lesson for those who possess intelligence. This will always be the system. This is a sign for the believers. So basically, God is talking about God has system for everything. Like the um, that the consequences, for the wicked and for the sinful acts would eventually there would be retribution. For if an entire community goes bad, even one believer is there still good. This kind of retribution was not gonna come. So that's why uh, these messengers or angels came to take Lot and his family out, even though they kind of that woman or his wife, she was whatever she was doing, they brought her out too, but put her in a test. Kind of, they knew that she will not listen. They asked them to, no matter what you do not look back, or do not have any doubt, or whether it was literally looking, turning around and looking back, or have no such wishful thinking. But I guess she became part of them, and she turned back and decided not to go with them, because she was going to be part of that retribution which struck them. And the town went upside down, meaning if something today sinks Like if a building sinks underground, and on top of that, like a sand dunes come over. So the rooftops would be, the upside of a house would be down under. This is how I see it. Like if the something goes down and another layer comes up. There were a couple of towns like ruins in Pakistan. They were dug deep, uh, were buried deep inside, like entire town. It's like people are working and something, and I have seen those cities. I don't know, Salaman, if you might know, it's called Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. It's very old civilization.
Yeah, Manjudaro and Harappa.
Yeah. And
I think I've
I
seen them too.
actually, yeah. And I remember as a child, I visited and then I was like in awe. It's like complete city was just down, like literally upside down. And it's some kind of annihilation happened to that community, and the entire community disappeared, or got buried, you know. So that's how it happens when it a tsunami can take away entire town or like part of the town. And obviously now we have much more population, and God's system is that if even there is one believer among those people, this kind of thing will not happen to that town. But God is showing us his system, that everybody's given a predetermined time, and when a community has, you know, crossed all the limits, and there is like no hope for left for them, no hope that they will listen to any message anymore or change. So there is no point for them to be living anymore. You know, the entire community. That used to happen a lot in olden times, like Noah's people and people of the woods here. It's a, I think the people of the woods were pagan, like they would do witchcraft and, you know, that kind of stuff, which used to be a very common practice at that time. Okay. Any other comment or question?
Assalamu alaikum. Actually, when Edward was doing the Quran study, I think verse 88, the last part. If anyone can give explanation, that would be great. Verse 88.
Um, can I answer that?
Sure.
Well, about
Well, about
the jealousy part,
No,
Pamela,
the last part.
and lower your wings for the believers.
Yeah, because Edward gave an explanation, but he wasn't sure. So, if anybody can clarify that, that'd be great.
sure. Nada, do
Okay.
you want to?
No, go ahead, Salma.
Okay. Well, it simply means to be kind to the believers. You know, be nice, be accommodating, be like lowering wings of humility, like being extra nice, being kind to them, for the believers. Like God says, the believers are kind and compassionate. Anyways, so just we all have to lower our wings for the believers, because they're honorable people. God's loves them. So
Thanks, Salman.
I don't know, I was disconnected. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, actually, a small comment and a question about what he was saying during the Quran study that he offered his daughters, and it used to bother me a lot too. That verse, that how a messenger would say something like that. But then I realized that it's something what Solomon says that you are not actually offering your daughters. It's like somebody's doing something very wrong or committing a crime to stop that person because he has those guests and they were so dear to him and he wanted to protect them. At that time, probably he didn't know that they were angels. So to stop those people, he go to that extent, like somebody's doing a crime and you said, if you want them to stop it and you offer something yourself, like if somebody's killing someone, you said, if you must kill that person, go ahead, you can kill me. You're not literally offering yourself, but to stop that crime, you're going to some extent for not to that happen. And then my question is like, uh, when Prophet Adam, I mean Adam and Eve came to this planet and they had kids, and were they marrying each other, brothers and sisters? Was there a custom? Because right now, when you're reading about Bible, that Lot was having, with his daughters, and our mind does not accept that. It's just like beyond, like because in the culture and society we live in now, our mind does not accept a father and daughter relationship in that. So was that normal? Because in Quran, God says that forbiddens are those women. There are certain categories in chapter 24. These women are forbidden for you. But is it before? Was it allowed or something in that sense or something like that? So that's my question.
I quickly want to comment on that because all the religion, Islam started from Abraham. So all the practices and prohibitions which did not change, probably um, Islamic Lot must be following Abraham's religion at that time. So, uh, and the town he must be giving that message to. But previously, at the time of Adam and all that, nobody knows. To repopulate, who knows, the laws were different at that time. I don't know.
My daughter did ask me that question one day, and I had no answer for her because she says to me, with Adam and Eve, who did their children marry to have children? And I had no clue what to tell her.
Yeah, I guess we cannot assume anything, right? We just, what can we say?
I
It's
mean,
no point anyway now.
in Islam, and uh, like you can marry your cousins. And when I used to tell this to like my Indian friends, like Sikh, Hindu, they were like, or even Christians, they were like, how can you marry your cousin? Because they grew up in that culture where cousins, they don't marry their cousins. They're like brothers and sisters to them. I think it all comes down to which society we born in. I mean, God made these rules, so we have to obey by them. And when you grow up in a society, this is normal for you, but in other society, maybe it's not.
I know my kids, my daughters grew up here, and you cannot even mention even in a joke that about marrying a cousin or anything, and it's just they've been so. I know they even know that, like the God, what God says, but they're so conditioned um, or brainwashed from this society, they cannot like visualize that or imagine that. It say they say it's impossible. You know, what can you do? So it's like, you know how you get repulsed by something. This society has created that. I mean, it's such a normal thing in Muslim countries to marry a cousin, but it's, anyway.
If anybody don't have any other question, can I ask a small question because we have to go soon? It's off topic. Off topic. Chronic, but off topic.
Please go ahead, Pamela.
So a
Okay.
question was
I think
posed to
also
me.
if anybody wants to explain uh, verse 87, that would be nice, about the seven pairs in the Great Quran relating to the end of the world.
Solomon, why don't you go ahead? Or should who wants to go first, Pamela or
Wait. Pamela was already talking though.
No,
yeah?
no,
Oh,
mine is
No, no,
not
no.
based on the Quran.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt because I couldn't hear anyone. My volume was
Okay,
down,
she.
and after I made my comment, I thought nobody was
Oh no,
talking.
she wanted to ask a quick question. Go ahead,
But
Pamela.
you know what? How
Mm-hmm.
about this? Because what Salman is talking about is based on what we just read, so maybe he should go ahead first. And because mine
Yeah,
is Quranic but off topic. Off topic.
because Solomon's topic is really long. The
Yeah,
Quranic
that's a
initials
long
and all
one.
that.
That's a long topic. We can talk about that.
Yours is quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So it has been asked by me. Someone asked me recently. It's about dowry, and we are encouraged to encourage the younger people to get married, and the younger people are now coming out of university and they're having 60, 70, $80,000 of loan, and when they have that loan amount and they're encouraged to be married early, um how do you go about the dowry because they're in so much of a debt already, and of course the dowry is supposed to be an amount whereby if something happened the female is protected. So how can someone answer that question? How would you answer that question?
I want to say anybody can talk about anything they want. They don't have to answer in any order. They can talk about Solomon's topic or Pamela's question. It doesn't matter. Whichever subject you want to make a comment on.
I think we read these verses, and we should explain them first because we read them, and we can do address off topic afterwards. That's just my suggestion.
That's a
That
good
sounds
one.
great, Solomon. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, let's finish the inshallah verses, this verse, and then we can move to, God willing, Pamela's question.
So are we going to read Appendix 1 and 2 to answer Solomon's question?
No, my question is just, can somebody explain briefly what are the seven pairs and how it relates to the end of the world? Just to give people a brief introduction on what those are. I mean, those are the initials, right? And how do they? Okay, I guess I can just go. All right, so yeah, so those 7 pairs are talking about the 14 initials in the Quran, that all these chapters are prefixed by these initials, and if you add the geometrical values of those initials, then you can see, as detailed in appendix titled "The End of the World," uh, you can see the total, and this was one of the duties of God's messenger of the covenant, to unveil the end of the world. This is appendix 25, and you can read about that. So you can see in appendix 25, the table 1 refers to all the Quranic initials, and the total comes out to be 1709 of all these initials. And so basically, when Edward referred to the marker, this information, the unveiling of this information took place in 1400 after Hijrah, or 309 years before the prophesied end of the year. So 1709 minus 1400 is 309, which is a Quranic number and is connected to the end of the world. And you can see that if you look at the differences between the solar year and the lunar year, the date that this date is, it's actually 309 as well. And so if you would like to learn more about the end of the world and these initials, you can read appendix 1 and 2. And specifically, if you want to know about the end of the world, you could read appendix 25 in Dr. Khalifa's uh, authorized English version of the Quran. I guess that's enough.
That's a good explanation.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hopefully you can hear me. I'm outside, but there's some music in the background. Just wanted to mention about the sleepers of the cave. I think at the beginning of that chapter, which I can't recall, God specifically mentions about the numbers in relation to the sleepers of the cave and why he's mentioning those numbers. And it's because he wants to unveil the end of the world to us, so that we know for certainty this world's going to come to an end. And Rashad mentions how God specifically hides the details about how many kids were in the cave and the dog, but he does mention about the number of years to indicate the end of the world, but he doesn't mention about how many kids were in the cave, which is interesting, because it shows that God is emphasizing one fact and not the other for a reason. That's all I wanted to mention. And about the question about the dowry for young people coming out of university, I also got that same question, probably from the same person, Pamela. My my initial thought.
You're getting married? You're too young.
Well, I'm not that young, unfortunately, unless I go back to uni and do a master's or something. I really will be poor coming out of university then. I just wanted, my initial thought, and this is not necessarily based on the Quran, so please correct me if it's wrong, but I thought, see, some of the things in the Quran, it's really based around the ideal situation. And there's lots of variations, right? Everybody's got a different situation. And sometimes God, in my opinion, is talking about the ideal situation. And so I thought, in an ideal situation, if you come out of university, generally you probably got no money and you want to get married, you want to do the right thing and not do the wrong thing, then I would think you could go to your parents and ask for a loan for the dowry, and then use that and then pay your parents back. The guy could. But another suggestion was, oh, maybe you could have an agreement where you pay some of the dowry now and then pay some later after you're married. And I don't think that's a good suggestion. That's setting the girl up for failure.
Yeah.
They were just my points.
Thanks, Steve. Point.
Yeah. I have a
That wouldn't have worked in my
comment
case,
regarding that.
but it might work if the parents can afford.
Yeah. Steve, how much dowry are you willing to offer? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's $1 million question, and it might be $1 million question, literally.
$1 million dowry.
Well, but I mean, when I think back when I was young, it was a long time before I had any money in my bank account. So even a small dowry was like, wow, that's out of my reach. I would have had to wait for years.
So about when it comes to marriage, there's also verse 425. It says, those among you who cannot afford to marry free believing women may marry believing slave women. God knows best about your belief, and you're equal to one another as far as belief is concerned. You shall obtain permission from their guardians before you marry them, and pay them their due dowry equitably. They shall maintain moral behavior by not committing adultery or having secret lovers. Once they're freed through marriage, if they commit adultery, their punishment shall be half of that of the free women. Marrying a slave, and then this part actually is what I wanted to stress. It says, marrying a slave shall be a last resort for those unable to wait. To be patient is better for you. God is forgiver, most merciful. So basically, these verses are telling us when we want to get married, we have to be patient. Like, if you feel that you're in a position where you don't have, you just got out of college, then that means, like, well, you don't have money for dowry. That means you cannot afford to marry someone, because when you want to offer dowry, remember the dowry has to be something that is substantial enough for a woman that if you divorce her, that she's able to survive on it for at least like a year, because it's security for the woman. So, I mean, based on your means, obviously, if you are a rich person, you can provide dowry in accordance with your means. If you're a poorer person, then you provide in accordance with your means, right? But if you have no dowry to begin with, and let's say you don't have work, or even just you don't have money to pay for dowry, then you should be patient, and maybe that means that you maybe save up a little bit, before you get into it. I mean, God can provide for you, like, in a year. Let's say you get to know someone and you wait another year maybe, and then save up, for that. I mean, if you have other loans like student loans and stuff like that, for example, I mean, you could still make payments on that, right? But if you're encouraged to get married, then maybe you can just really save up for dowry and still continue to make payments on other things. But depending on what you want to do first, do you want to be debt free first, or you want to be married first? But I would say the best thing is to wait, and also the thing with the waiting, like, also the messenger of the covenant gave a sermon on marriage, right? And the sermon was and the sermon sorry and so the sermon was like very detailed about dowry. And I think one of the stipulations that about marriage with the dowry is, like, you can always make an agreement, like, let's say, like, you'll get this dowry, um, even when we'll have this dowry, but the dowry should be there now, but you can take it later. But it shouldn't be like, you say, like, oh, if you have no money, and you say, well, your dowry is going to be 500,000 or something like that, which you don't have, obviously, and then when you get divorced, you might not have it, right? So it's just so it should be something that you can afford now when you set the dowry, at least, like it's sitting somewhere in some account that you give to her. It could, and it doesn't have to be money. It can be something of monetary value that you might already have, that could be a security that she can take it later, but it should be substantial enough to provide for her for some time, like a year or something at least.
Yeah, you're right. I absolutely agree. And I had a point that I just forgot. What was it? Oh yeah, and yeah. I mean, I think maybe sometimes people forget the dowry is to provide for the wife for her security in case of divorce, and I think the man and particularly the woman has to think about that when thinking about the dowry. It's not necessarily to go buy a Prada handbag because I'm sad because I got divorced. Although they could come into it, but you know what I mean. There's a specific reason behind it and a purpose for it. Um, so there's needs some thought needs to go into it, I guess. That's all. I'm gonna go and pray now, so I'll be out for a while and then I'll come back, God willing.
So
Salãmun Alaykum.
Salam, Salman, thank you so much.
no problem. Thank you. I think also good thing to mention, since we're on the subject of marriage, is you know the age for the marriage, like, is also the same sermon that I just referenced. The Messenger of the Covenant also talked about the age of marriage, and he said, it should be like when you're both physiologically and psychologically mature, and it says usually like at least 10 years or so after puberty, so that's uh, not like usually that's not like 21 or something. I mean, before 21 or something, So a lot of times, we see people, even people who say they're submitters, but they end up getting married at 17 or 18 or something like that, and that's not what God is advocating. Like when we say encourage people, they should be at an age where they're not just physically, their bodies are physically mature, but they're also psychologically and emotionally mature to make these decisions. Our brain continues to develop after reaching puberty, and like up I mean, up until like we reach 40, still even then it's still developing, but especially around the time when after we reach puberty, there's still especially for the woman, the emotional stability has to come at a later age. It takes time for them to stabilize and be physiologically and psychologically, and as well as emotionally, like, ready and mature to commit to something like marriage.
If there are no more comments or questions, then we can stop streaming.
I I do have one or two comments.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, so one other comment I had was where it says, "Therefore, carry out the orders given to you and disregard the idol worshippers, and will spare you the mockers who set up another god besides God. They will surely find out. We know full well that you may be annoyed by their utterances. You shall sing the praise of your Lord and be with the prostrators and worship your Lord in order to attain certainty." So I guess there's a lot to be said here. I mean, these are, one, God says to disregard the idol worshippers, carry out the orders and disregard the idol worshippers. Now, some people will abuse these verses to say, that when somebody's advocating idol worship, that you should not make a stand or proclaim the truth because this verse is saying you disregard the idol worshippers. But that's not what this verse is talking about. Of course, when people are, spreading misinformation, and then God says, we strive with this Quran and this goodness, we promote the truth, and God, this is a form of striving, and God promises the believers who do that, they're advocating righteousness, forbidding evil, and saving for their post-retirement account for the hereafter. But what verse 94 to me is referring to is, for example, there's idol worshippers who are committing idol worship, but like Edward was saying earlier, they don't want you to talk about it because they're committing it, and uh, they want you to live by their what they say, like not preach against it. Like if Satan had his way, obviously we would never be talking about idol worship now, because that's what he wants. He really wants idol worship to flourish so he can win and get more people. But God says his plan continues in spite of the idol worshippers. So when it talks about disregarding them, I mean, it says don't don't obey them. Don't listen to what they're telling you. Just continue what you're doing. If you have to promote the truth, regardless of what the idol worshippers are saying, they're trying to put God's light with their mouths. You continue on to promote the worship of God alone. In other words, and whoever is mocking you and stuff like that, don't worry about it. These people have already set up another god besides God, and God is aware of the fact that also that we might be annoyed by these people, as it says in verse 97, to even the messenger and the believers, that they are annoying people that are saying nonsense and unreasonable requests and unreasonable ideas and name calling and all kinds of stuff. So God says disregard them, disregard all the nonsense that they're telling you to abide by, and you just you live the life of a submitter, and you promote the truth, and you ignore what they have to say in that sense. And then another important thing for us here is to sing the praises of our Lord and be with the prostrators and worship your Lord in order to attain certainty. And then the footnote says that worship practices are a means of attaining certainty. So they are our steak and lobster for our soul in order to grow our soul and attain certainty. I mean, if our souls are not fully nourished, then we're going to be doubtful. So one of the ways and in which we can attain certainty is through all our worship practices, and obviously, that includes salat, zakat, fasting, and hajj, which are all means by which we grow our souls by remembering God, and just remembering God throughout the day and commemorating Him and praising His name is going to bring us closer to God. And we'll, at the same time, it will as our soul is nourished, it will be happy, and we will whatever these people are saying, it won't really bother us as much and won't worry us. We'll be content. That's all I wanted to say there. Just that I have no more comments.
I think you said you had two more.
No, these were all my comments.
Oh.
Yeah. I kind of put them all together like in a bunch.
Where's the Ahmad?
Um,
So we're gonna turn off the stream, or
oh yeah. Oh,
are
he's
we?
not here. He was there when we started.
Oh,
Someone wake him up. Oh, maybe he left. Wait, I see A. I see an A. Is that Adam?
Yes, that's me.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I guess Ahmed's gone. Okay, if, I can try to do it remotely. Let's see how that goes. I guess before we do that, maybe you can end finishing remarks, Edward,
huh?
and you can just before we end the stream, maybe you can end, God willing.
Close the show. I don't have this.
No, I mean about the next study and who's going to be our teacher, God willing.
Today is 11, 12, 13, 14. Saturday the 14th, the next one. Hello?
Yeah.
So God willing, the next session is this Saturday, the September 14th, Pacific time, California time, the 9 a.m. I'm not sure what time it is in other areas. Pacific Mountain time, I think it is in California. And God willing, since we finished, the last verse we read the end of chapter 15, so we're gonna read chapter 16 from the beginning. Whoever is gonna read, we'll have a different reader.
Yes. So, Nudut, are you going to be able to read God willing on Saturday?
Yeah, inshallah.
God willing, Nudut will be our teacher.
Oh, that's really silent. I can't hear Solomon's car anymore. Are you guys there? Whoa, very like dead silence. Did we get disconnected?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. There's people still there. Maybe just Solomon got disconnected. Where, Adam? Where are you located?
In Texas?